last day before the lockdown looked like. Because if I had to ask you to tangibly articulate what your last day of normalcy was like, and that's what it is with the gravitas attached to it, was your last day of normalcy, and as it was mine, would you think it's worth that kind of reconstruction? Because in all honesty, if I had to give this thought any kind of meaning, I would say that my last day of normalcy and the last evening before I lost that sense of normalcy was completely inconspicuous. There was nothing out of the ordinary or significant about it per se. That being said, I did make a promise to the people that I loved that I would see them soon enough, and that the arrangement of being dispersed across cities was not one of, permanent being. However, despite pitting the rest of my day as just what I would term as a hoard of disposable memories, I would say that I am a huge hypocrite because I find myself raking over them relentlessly, over and over again. I find myself in a loop, looking at them and wondering where exactly it all began and where exactly that sense of stability ended for me. I try to examine everything I said and did just to gain an understanding of how I navigated the day with as much ease as I did. And obviously, when I say so, it accompanies a sense of negativity surrounding it, that, I am not completely in tandem with myself when I'm operating under circumstances of a lockdown. And that's true. I'm not. It's a very different space that I find myself in now. And coming to the acceptance that we're going to be in this reality for much longer than anticipated, it was one of sudden bereavement, and yet it was a gradual process, knowing that this was obviously going to happen. We've been practically taking the measures for disease prevention for over a year now, and they have been infused with compassion in knowing that we need to do what we're doing for the sake of ourselves, our families, and just the broader expanse of mankind, just so many people that we would be saving if we have the capacity to isolate ourselves. But despite having an acute awareness of human decency, that does not allay the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And that's perfectly okay. We find ourselves in hard places sometimes, and that's okay. However, the purview of this conversation cannot cover what constitutes stability. For sure, that's too broad an expanse to cover. However, this conversation what it can do is articulate and attempt to unravel how people react to catastrophes the way they do. And it's pertinent to note that this conversation is even more important now, more than ever, because, we live in a world at the moment where human existence has been reduced to, or rather it has morphed into statistics of recovery and other rates that we're looking at, and that metrics of measurement has somehow put a full stop on our personhood. You don't know where your personhood begins and where that seamless fabric of human existence ends. It's a very blurry line to look at, and if that's a stitch we had to draw up, I reckon it would be a very difficult endeavor to take on. And so I find it even more fascinating that the writer, Alexander Chee, he said that it's our duty to matter. That as if authenticity is both intrinsic and extrinsic. That we owe it to ourselves and to the world to be completely ourselves in absolute authenticity. We owe our authenticity to the world, rather. And I find that very confusing because, in my mind, I'm thinking about what the term authenticity itself is. It's loaded with the presumption of uncontested knowledge. It sets in definite boundaries, saying that your narrative is one of sheer surety. That if you're calling yourself authentic, then there is no, that it is watertight, that understanding of yourself is absolutely watertight. There can be no alterations to it, at least not for the time being, which I find so absurd, because not only is it an hour of disarray that we're existing in right now and knowing ourselves and truly getting to know ourselves, it's a fluctuating process, and not just a fluctuating process, our sense of self itself is fluctuating, if that makes sense. And yeah, and that being said, there are a lot of writers and poets who have often contended that we're like a drop in the ocean, which makes sense, because what we're eventually just trying to do is that we're a part of a much larger, something much larger than us, all of us. And we're just trying to, attempting at understanding when to, when to surrender and when to resist. It's the art of ebbing and flowing that we're trying to learn. And it's accompanied with a sense of that art, learning that art, it's accompanied with a sense of profound quietude. It's so strange that there's a whole school of thought within spirituality that considers that quietude as a result of internal discipline. Like the inner peace, what you would think of and call phrase inner peace. But that entire school of thought operates under the presumption that our externality is diverged, it is separated, it is cleaved from our internality. Our ability to make decisions, our agency and power is entirely unaffected by the trials and tribulations of our externalities, which I think is completely untrue to the representation of human life and reality as we know it. And hence it doesn't answer the basic question that I'm trying to get at, is that when you find yourself in a situation where your ecosystem, your habitat doesn't permit you to doesn't permit the kind of self-validation that you're looking for and for the kind of self-validations your feelings require, then how do you survive in a habitat that isn't well acclimatized and well adapted to your internality? What do you do? What are you supposed to do? What are you expected to do, rather, when you are at war with the virus, the places you live in, and yourself? Where do you find yourself when you find yourself at that crossroad? What do you think it is that you're going to do next? When I was younger, and I have always had a very true belief that as, with every progressing year, I attain some sort of sensibility. I know it's a little odd, but, you attain a little more sensibility than you had the last year. And suddenly there's a vast timeline that's gone by. And, you're an adult who knows how to make the decisions that you need to. And that essentially defines the kind of circumstances you find yourself in. It ensures that you don't fall victim to the mischance of sorrow or rage. You just don't come in the line of fire by mistake. You can dislocate yourself from a situation of discomfort and put yourself rather in and engage with activities that bring you unfiltered joy, and completely on your own terms. I found that writing and, being in the realm of nature has helped me cope with the things around me, with the circumstances around me. And it's helped me build the boundaries that I have, and they're healthy coping mechanisms. However, I never realized how much of my my solitude was attributed to the exhilaration of movement, like being able to go from one place to the next, like just being in transit, that kind of liminality of being able to witness sunrises, sunsets, and the buildings around college, being able to see them light up in joy every evening. So that kind of liminality and space for adjustment, that interlude, because it was guaranteed, I didn't have to think before I stretched myself in 20 different directions. I extended my capacities to beyond the horizon that I had assumed, and learned new skill sets, did like a horde of activities, or prepared myself to be in situations, because that liminality helped me do so. And then suddenly being placed in a scenario when you don't have that anymore, you have to think about what and how you're going to cope with that in itself, with no space, with rather not no space, but when you're limited to a space with punctured with absolutely no reprieve, how do you exist, how do you coexist with that? So I spent week after week, month after month in denial of where I was and who I was, rather, who I was turning into. And I don't know how fruitful that entire process was, but I do know that one day it came to a very sudden halt. Like, it came to a screeching halt, and I had to really think about where I was, and I was not happy with who I was either. And that sense of grief, sense of loss, it turned into a vacuum, a vacuum that I had been avoiding for so long. So when this took place, I truly wondered about the nature of grief. It's said that grief is essentially attributed to death. That's the only possibility it's possible in. However, if I really think about it, I in finality wondered if the death of my past self, a more self-assured one, even a kinder one for that matter, if the death of that resilient individual, if that merited me a period of bereavement. So when I thought about this and I kept stewing in this endless period of yearning, I realized that there's a lot they don't tell you about vacuums. Beginning with the fact that vacuums, they begin as sizable structures, and suddenly they're festering into and evolving into this corpus that's swallowing you whole. And it's a great deal easier to just succumb than to fight it, because you don't have the tools and techniques to fight it. That's what makes this, the next statement that I'm going to tell you about, even funnier than I had anticipated. Someone once told me that life is just this one huge act of letting go, right? But if you don't have any redressal mechanism in place, how do you do it? And what terms and conditions does it come with? Like, what am I supposed to? Because everything in life comes with terms and conditions. So accordingly, even this area of discussion, this discourse in itself elicits the idea that you have to talk about the kind of conditions you're operating under, you're using these techniques under. So where's my guidebook? What tells me what rules govern what I'm supposed to allow to escape me, what circumstances should escape me, and what I should hold on to and put my foot down and say, no, this is not right. And when you find yourself at such a crossroad, you're wondering what to do next. You have a whole corpus that's swallowing you, right? Like I talked about black holes and I talked about vacuums. Vacuums are essentially black holes. But when you reach that stage, you have to know that no matter what, you can't give up on yourself. And you definitely can't give in to whatever intrinsic need to succumb occupies you. Because that's not really the kind of personality that you are. It might be a part of you, or it might not even be a part of you. I don't come from a place of expertise by no metric. But you know that you have to keep going. So you find self-validation. You use your mind sight to create a sense of self-regulation and resilience that's required when you don't have a community supporting your well-being. And then at that point in time, you use whatever tools and techniques you can to create a safe space within yourself. And that's very significant because it helps you withdraw into yourself. What you would consider as a self-centered notion isn't actually one. It's a very positive place to be in, and you don't engage with any kind of conflict. You don't put yourself at the centrality. And yes, that's how you start off. You start off with that self validation and you just take it forward from there. Eventually, that kind of kindness that you foster for yourself, it also grows and evolves like the vacuum. I hope it does. It takes longer, I guess. I'm not sure of that entirely, but you do become kinder to yourself. In the end, I think what you do need to remember is that this battle of well-being, this bargain, it's not one that you need to fight alone. People assume that this is a very lone battle that you need to get into. But the thing is, it has everything to do with the people around you and the community that you want to build. Essentially, if you want to build that kind of gratitude and that kind of a support framework around you, it means you're just building a sturdy foundation. You're just attempting at that. So you should seek out to the people that you trust and love. And in that, know that sometimes the bricks might not fit. But that's okay, right? Like, not all the bricks need to fit at the correct time. You just need to remember that it'll take a few more tries. It's going to take a few other resources, which you have handy. Everything you need, you have. And so if you have access to professional help and healthcare, I think you should seek out to it, because that's something that's never going to be frugal. It's going to add years to your lifetime beyond your comprehension. I don't think I can even articulate the kind of value that brings to your life and the way you sustain. So you just have to know that you need to have patience and you need to keep going. And it's a lot like swimming. This whole process of recovery, it's a lot like swimming, because you can't learn how to swim without a floaty, or you're going to drown. And if you can't navigate the waves, the waters themselves by, solely as a singular unit, then you seek out the help of an instructor or those around you. You know that if you're in a sea, if you're doing any kind of diving, you do take the help of other people around you. And most importantly, if you can't breathe, you come up for air. You don't stay underwater. You don't drown yourself on purpose. So I think these rules become even more fascinating if you fall into the habit of neglecting your body. And Chanel Miller taught me that if your body is showing any sense of discomfort, any notations any signs that might notify you of internal dissatisfaction and neglect, then that you have to, that then it's your body that's telling you, and it's telling you that it needs to govern you, because otherwise both of you get hurt. You have to work together. In the end, all I want to say is that Dory very wisely once said that you just need to keep swimming. And that's not exactly what she said. I'm paraphrasing slightly, but yes, that's basically what she had said. She said, just keep swimming. So take this as a sign, if you need to keep going. And if you can't survive the next day, next week, or the pandemic, remember just to survive the next 15 minutes. You can do it. I believe in you.